Black woman napped mid-flight, then stunned everyone. When the captain asked, "Any fighter pilot on board?" the bell over the bar door didn't ring. It cracked and tumbled across tile like a loose rivet. A 6-year-old boy shot inside, sneakers squealing, breath hiccuping. "Hide me!" he blurted, ducking behind a biker whose leather vest read, "Badlands, Route 66. Still here. Please, mister, hide me from my mother." The tarmac taproom froze mid-sip. Neon buzzed. A luggage tug trundled past the big window like an angry turtle. Beyond the glass, twilight made the runway a dark river threaded with lanterns. At a corner table, a black woman in a sand-colored hoodie lifted her head from a travel pillow, the crease of sleep still across her cheek. She watched the boy with one eye and the clock with the other. Boarding in 19 minutes. Her name was Major Rediport Morgan Elise Carter, and the world would learn it the hard way in a few hours. But right now, she was just a nap in human form. A woman who'd flown more night than most people sleep in a year. The biker tilted his head at the kid. "Why you need hiding, little man?" "She says if I get too close to planes, I'll grow wings and fly away," the boy whispered, dead serious. A couple regulars chuckled. A man at the high top smirked at his phone. Morgan stood, rolling the sleep out of her shoulders like pilots roll a bank. She crouched until she was eye level with the boy. "You like airplanes?" He nodded, eyes bright. "Me too," she said. "When I was your age, I named the jets after dinosaurs, and I thought the runway lights were stars that fell down to help." The biker's mouth twitched. The bar door swung again. A woman blew in, hair frizzed from sprinting, panic and relief sharing her face. She saw her son's shoelaces peeking from behind leather and exhaled a prayer made of air and tears. "He can look through the big glass," Morgan said to the mother, pointing at the window. "But out there?" She angled her chin to the ramp. "Dragon's back. Dangerous." The woman nodded. The man at the high top, not looking up, said, "Some people need to learn boundaries." Morgan ignored him. She took the boy's hand, guided him and his mother to the glass. They pressed their palms there, 3 imprints fogging in slow pulses. A 737 flared and kissed asphalt beyond, spoilers lifting like shoulders in relief. "What's your name, pilot?" Morgan asked. "Theo." "Theo," she said, "if you ever do grow wings, pick ones that turn toward home." He grinned. The bartender snapped a disposable camera photo. She kept one for odd miracles. The biker threw a 2-finger salute. Morgan's phone vibrated. Boarding Group 3. She gathered her backpack, yawned away the last threads of sleep, and headed for gate F12. She didn't hear the high-top man mutter, "Group 3 for coach, not cockpits." But she felt the old pressure gradient shift in the room the way birds feel a storm an hour before it breaks. At F12, a gate agent scanned faces like tickets. A little girl stamped her pink suitcase. A tall man rolled a boardroom in aluminum. Morgan scanned the sky glowing eggplant at the edges. High cirrus like frost. A front far out. Easy night, she thought, the way a sailor thinks calm sea, grateful, suspicious. She didn't know the captain on her flight would later key the PA with a voice tight as wire and ask a sentence she had never expected to hear in a cabin built for sleep. "Is there any fighter pilot on board?" Morgan Elise Carter grew up under the flight path where bedtime stories paused for turbofans. Her grandmother's porch in Norfolk faced a sky that coughed up steel birds, and her grandfather would tap his cigarette against the rail and say, "Hear that? That's somebody going somewhere." Her mother worked nights at a hospital. Her father ran a lathe and made metal. Remember what it was supposed to be. Morgan learned early that America had rules nobody wrote down, and some they tattooed onto your face the minute you walked into certain rooms. At school, a guidance counselor suggested she look at stable paths like administration. Morgan brought in a model F-16 she built with tweezers and a magnifier and set it on the counselor's desk without a word. The counselor said, they don't, and Morgan said, "They do. Watch me." She watched every crash documentary she could find and learned not to be afraid of them, but to honor the checklists they paid for. She took trigonometry apart like a carburetor and put it back together better. She ran track because she liked the feeling of catching her body's fall with rhythm. She learned an extra language, radio. Her ROTC instructor, a woman with a voice like a rivet gun and eyes like a safe harbor, drove her to an air show, and pointed at a black woman in a flight suit walking like the tarmac belonged to her. "You see that?" she said. "Don't you dare blink." Morgan didn't. USAF Academy said maybe. Her file said yes. She learned to wake before dawn likes to exist. She learned the smell of JP8 and the way cold eats your bones at altitude. She learned to move inside a cockpit like music. She learned to listen with her hands. She learned that some men would shake the hand of her male wingman while looking over her shoulder for the real pilot, and that some of those men would later whisper, "Do you, do the hard turns?" And she would say, "All the turns are hard at 9 Gs. The trick is blood." She learned the call signs stuck like gum and chose one for herself before someone else did. Muse. Not because she inspired them, but because she inspired herself. Deployed twice, she flew air-to-air cover over convoys where every third truck felt like a dice roll. She learned what the inside of a tanker's boom looked like at midnight, how to sip fuel from a flying straw while the world beneath her forgot it was attached to the same sky. She learned the intercept dance, the one you never talk about in movies because it's mundane and holy at once. Identify, signal, shepherd, avoid. She learned the language of rock, wing, follow me. She learned not to twitch when flares painted the dark like ugly fireworks. She also learned the other math, the bandwidth spent smoothing doubt. A colonel who introduced her as our diversity win at a banquet. A crew chief who called her sweetheart until she put a finger on the checklist and said, "Sir, you missed a line." He didn't call her sweetheart again. When she rotated into an instructor billet, she turned kids who thought the joystick was a video game into pilots who understood machines are honest and the air is not. She did 12 years, then a medical discharge when a microfracture in her cervical spine made a flight surgeon tap a page and say, "I'm not grounding your soul. I'm grounding your vertebrae." She saluted, cried later in her car, and built a life that didn't require supersonic. Civilian test pilot contract, consulting, teaching high schoolers at a STEM program that paid in pizza and joy, flying little Cessnas for the smell and the landing flare and the way the world looks smallest right when you're about to touch it. On the ground, the same gravity applied. A luxury car dealer who assumed she was there to look, not buy, until she paid cash for a used pickup she preferred anyway. A graying executive in a boarding line who told a gate agent, "I don't want the lady near the exit row. She looks tired." And she smiled and took 12C and read an article about how men who look like him sleep worse. The little cuts added up, but so did the little salvations. A mechanic who said, "You got good hands, Carter," and meant skill, not softness. A girl in her class who wrote pilot on a slip of paper and stuffed it into a shoebox labeled later, and then came back and yanked it out and said, "Now." Morgan's house had a wall of framed checklists. Her phone had a note she read before every flight as a passenger. "You are not on duty, you can sleep, you owe nobody proof." She had a mother who texted Psalm 139 before red eyes, and a father who refused to call anything a miracle because it made the math mad. She had nights when memories roared louder than engines. And she had a therapist who taught her how to land those too without bouncing. Tonight, she had a middle seat to Denver, a connecting hop to Spokane, a rented pickup waiting, and a classroom of kids in the morning who believed clouds were solid and would be delighted to be wrong. Gate F-12 loaded like a slow puzzle. A bachelor party in matching shirts argued brisket. A woman clutched index cards like talismans. A retired couple did the smile of people who finally have time. The high-top man from the tap room arrived late, entitled Velocity, and tried to cut the lane. The agent said, "We're all going to the same sky," and he pretended to laugh. Morgan scanned the crew through the window reflection. Captain in his 50s, calm gait. First officer younger, sharp movements. Lead flight attendant with hospitality pinned on like a duty ribbon. No one looked like a villain. They rarely do. She boarded, stowed her backpack, slid into 14B. The aisle filled with soft luggage and hard opinions. A boy behind her practiced tapping his tray like a Morse code for boredom. Overhead, the safety demo played. Morgan mouthed along because rituals calm her. The high-top man, now 7C, asked the flight attendant, "We good on the female pilot thing?" with a smirk meant to be plausible deniability if challenged. The attendant's face didn't move. "We're good on the pilot thing," she said. Morgan closed her eyes and let the hum find her bones. Pushback, taxi. Nose wheel bump over a seam in concrete she could have mapped with her eyes shut. Takeoff roll. The long inhale. Rotate. The city sagged away in yellow lines like dropped necklaces. Leveling. Chime. The cabin settled into its nightly liturgy. Ice clinks, page flips, soft snores, the kind of whispers people do when they think sleep absolves them. Morgan fell under hard, the honest kind. Somewhere around cruise, the air changed. Not a bump, a taste, faint metallic like old coins and hot wire. Her body noticed before her mind did. Low-grade headache knuckled behind her eyes. She blinked awake. Across the aisle, a flight attendant frowned toward the forward galley, then did a little white glove pantomime with her nose like, "Do you smell that?" The other nodded. Morgan sniffed. Ozone, maybe, or overheated electronics. She watched the first officer walk back fast, straight to the lav, then the forward galley, then whisper to the lead. The captain's voice came over PA, steady, a little too shiny. "Folks, we're experiencing a minor systems indication in the forward avionics bay. Out of an abundance of caution, we'll be diverting to Cheyenne for a quick inspection." Murmurs ruffled the cabin. Annoyance first, fear second. Morgan sat up, all sleep burned off by training. Avionics bay, hot wire smell. She knew half a dozen ways that could go sideways, and almost all of them ended fine. Almost. The descent began shallower than she'd prefer, then a little steeper. The nose dipped, leveled. Her inner ear flagged a slight hunting motion, autopilot wrestling. She watched the flight attendants conferring with their jaws. In row 7, the high-top man made the universal face for, "I paid more than them? Fix it faster." At 10,000 feet, the captain didn't ding the seatbelt sign off. A tell. Morgan adjusted her breathing, slow, even. She noticed the woman at 14A blinking too much. She noticed a teenager massaging his temples. She noticed the crew moving more carefully than normal. The smell got pokier, like someone had opened a panel and let the ghost out. Then, the PA again, and the captain's voice had lost its shine. It was wire now. "Ladies and gentlemen, if there is any fighter pilot on board, please make yourself known to a member of the crew." Silence snapped taut. Then a scatter of gasps. A few nervous laughs, someone saying, "Is this a joke?" No joke. You could hear the cabin's pulse trip. Morgan unbuckled. The lead flight attendant was already hustling up the aisle, eyes scanning heads like they were life vests. Morgan stood. "Here," she said, voice carrying without shouting. "Air-to-air, Viper, call sign Muse, what do you need?" The attendant's relief flashed and got put away because professionals don't spill it. "Come with me." She keyed the interphone as they moved. "Captain, I have someone." Morgan slipped past galley carts in fear. As they reached the forward bulkhead, the smell strengthened, a breath of hot plastic. The attendant cracked the cockpit door and ushered her through. Inside, the panel was a Christmas tree in a bad neighborhood. Amber cautions, one red eye that made your stomach drop if you let it. The first officer's face had the chalky look of someone doing math faster than adrenaline allows. A portable oxygen mask dangled. The captain wore his, but his hands trembled a hair. The airplane wasn't falling. It was arguing. The captain's eyes flicked to her. "You really?" "Yes, sir," she said, already scanning. "What's hot?" "Avionics bay temp spike, intermittent smoke smell, possible bus fault." Autopilot kicked, came back, kicked again. "We're on raw data, descending to 7. His voice held like a beam under stress. Morgan took the jump seat, buckled. "Pressurization holding?" "Yes." "Electrical isolations tried." "A and B per QRH. Fault migrates left to right, then sleeps, then blinks." "Fire handle?" "Negative indication." "Cheyenne?" "ATC has us straight in." She nodded, eyes scanning attitude, speed, needles. The jet held course but felt loose. She looked at the captain's hands. The tremor wasn't fear. It was something else. Hypoxia whispers, "You know me?" No, the mask should block that. He was sweating under his hairline. The first officer swallowed, blinking more than a man should blink. Morgan's training clicked another switch. Slow burn fumes can mess with brains before oxygen catches up. She grabbed the spare portable mask, snapped it to her face. "Sir, switch to 100%, she said, gentle but not asking. He frowned, then did. Color came back a notch. The first officer followed her eyes, realized he'd been sipping instead of gulping, turned his selector. Better. The airplane steadied a whisper, not because it had changed, but because two brains had. Okay, she said. If the bus is phantom faulting and the smell is real, we keep it simple, we keep it manual, we don't chase ghosts. You fly, you trim. If the AP kicks, let it. If human hands are better, be human hands. The captain nodded. Copy. His eyes found hers. You're Carter? Yes, sir. A tiny smile ghosted under his mask. Heard of you. I'm better on 8 hours of sleep, she deadpanned. He laughed through his nose, which is how pilots say thank you for showing me the floor I can stand on. ATC, she asked. The first officer pointed. Vectors to the ILS-27. Winds 10 at 15. Beautiful, she said. Fastest checklist. Confirm gear, flaps per normal, keep it high on energy, don't get slow chasing a gremlin. We land, we roll. We stop. Nobody dies tonight. The captain's mouth twitched. Aye. Outside, Cheyenne's runway lights rose like a city you invent when you need it. Inside, Morgan ran the old fighter pilot scan, the one that sees everything at once and nothing you don't need. She keyed the interphone. Lead, advise cabin, firm landing, normal procedure, stay seated, no smoke observed. Tell them the calmest person on the plane is in the pointiest room. Copy, the attendant said, voice steadier now. In the cabin, 7C stopped smirking and started gripping armrests like confessions. In row 14, the woman who'd blinked too much fixed her eyes on the seat back and breathed slow like someone cheap studying a Lamaze video. Morgan set her palm on the console, an old ritual to tell the ship, I'm here. The jet nudged left, bus blink. The captain caught it with pressure and a word you can't say on PA. Morgan watched the needles, the diamond, the glide. You got it, she said quietly. You had it the whole time. He had, but it mattered that she said so because confidence is a control surface too. The first officer worked radios with the crispness of someone who'd found the edge and stepped back. Tower, we're established 2-7. Cleared to land 2-7. Trucks standing by. Roger. 700 feet AGL. The smell eased like a sulk. 500. Stable, the captain said, and the word poured a layer of glass over chaos. 200. Winds poked. He corrected smooth as a drum beat. Minimums, the airplane intoned. Landing, he answered. Flare. Wheels kissed. Spoilers lifted, reversers ate air, and then they were rolling a world into stillness. The captain eased reverse back, gentle, like setting a sleeping child down. 60 knots. Taxi off. Stop. Silence broke into applause because humans are cliché in all the best ways when they get to keep living. The captain exhaled, then pulled off his mask. He turned to Morgan. You saved our asses. She shook her head. You saved them. I saved your checklist. She unbuckled the jump seat. Let's get the people off the Dragon's back. They parked at a remote stand. Fire trucks haloed the plane like red saints. The forward door opened to cold night and fluorescent mercy. The lead flight attendant caught Morgan's sleeve. Stay, she mouthed. They need to see you. She meant more than the passengers. The captain keyed the PA. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. Out of caution for an avionics indication, we've diverted. We are safe. We are grateful. And we owe thanks to a fellow passenger who assisted us with, uncommon experience. He glanced at Morgan. Major Carter. A flutter moved down the cabin, the kind that perks up when a story gets a protagonist. The lead gestured. Morgan stepped into the doorway. Cheering lifted, then quieted itself under its own weight. 7C didn't clap. He stared, face pinched like old paper. He stood edged forward. So this is what we're doing now? He said, voice pitched for an audience, asking randoms to fly planes. Several heads snapped his way with disgust as fast as seatbelts allow. Morgan looked at him and saw what she'd seen 1,000 times. A man who had built his safety out of hierarchy and resented it being shared. He waited for her to flinch. She didn't. We didn't ask, she said. We answered. He snorted. Well, lucky you were. Qualified. The pause was a paw print. The lead stepped sideways, protective and subtle. Morgan's voice moved a notch lower, calm as instrument flight. This is the part where you can say thank you and keep your dignity, she said. Or you can build a different story about who deserves to be here and keep your fear. Your call. He opened his mouth, closed it, sat down. His neighbor, a woman in a blazer, leaned toward him and said something that made him stare at his shoes. EMS boarded, checked the cockpit, took vitals, asked the captain and FO questions in the language of liability and compassion. Morgan answered a few. Yes, fumes. No visible smoke. Yes, oxygen improved symptoms. No, I did not touch anything you'd have to write a book about. The maintenance chief climbed the stairs, face like a wrench. Bus bar in the forward bay cooked itself. Hairline crack. Heat signature matched your timeline. Lucky. Not luck, the captain said, looking at Morgan. Skill. The chief looked at her, blinked, recalibrated. Thank you, ma'am, he said, and it sounded like a man who had daughters and a Torx wrench. The airline representative arrived to coordinate buses, hotels, apologies. A little boy from row 22 craned around adults and said, Are you a pilot? Morgan crouched. Used to be, she smiled. Now I teach little dragons to fly properly, he grinned. I want to be one. Good, she said. We need more. His mother, eyes rimmed in the exhaustion of almost, touched Morgan's elbow. I heard what that man said, she murmured, meaning 7C. I didn't say anything. I froze. Morgan softened. Sometimes silence is the seatbelt that keeps you from flying through the windshield when fear hits. Next time, if you have air to spare, say, watch her work. That's enough. The woman nodded, tucked the line away for later use like a tool. On the tarmac, the Wyoming night held stars the way the runway held lights. The world looked possible. 2 hours later, in a hotel lobby that smelled like oranges and corporate pen ink, the crew gathered around a paper cup of gratitude. The captain offered his hand. I'll be filing a report that reads like a hymn, he said. If you ever want a cockpit jump seat when the regs allow, call me. She squeezed his hand. You fly a good ship, she said. You kept it human. The first officer looked sheepish. I got lightheaded and didn't clock it. I should have. You did, she said, when you turned the selector and asked for help. That's the job. He swallowed. I said something stupid in training once, he confessed. About not being sure women like the, aggressive parts of flying. I was 24 and idiotic. You're older now, she said. That's the point. The airline offered a voucher. She took it and donated it in her head to the STEM program that never had enough to fly kids to regionals. She returned to the tap room because the bartender had promised to print the disposable camera photo. The biker was still there, nursing a root beer like a relic. He lifted a chin. You were the one on that bird? He said, not a question. Heard it on the scanner. She huffed a laugh. Guilty. Road don't care who you are, he said. Only how you ride. Sky either, she said. He slid the photo across the bar. Theo, small and fierce behind leather, a woman crouched to his eye line, a runway outside. For the kid, he said, in case he grows wings. She tucked it into her wallet. She texted her mother, divert safe. Smell like pennies, we'll call. Her mother wrote back, God holds even the buses. Her father wrote, tell the plane it owes you rent. At 3 a.m., in a quiet room with a heavy bedspread, Morgan lay awake and replayed the red eye. The smell, the PA, the line she'd stepped over without thinking, the face of 7C, the face of the captain when the runway came up sure beneath him. She felt the sting of the small racism she'd pocketed without making a scene, the man's female pilot thing, and the old ache that came from being asked to prove it again. And she felt the equal and opposite hum that came from competence respected in public. In the morning, she would stand in front of a classroom and say, turn to your neighbor and tell them what air tastes like at night. And they would laugh. And then write. And then a girl who never raised her hand would raise it and ask what it's like to be the only one in the cockpit who looks like you, and Morgan would say, it looks like work. And the girl would nod because that answer is both heavier and lighter than people think. In the weeks that followed, The airline sent her a letter with embossed logos and a paragraph of corporate humility. A maintenance bulletin rippled through the fleet. Inspect the bus bars. Replace the suspect vintage. Retrain crews on subtle fume symptoms. Emphasize 100% oxygen at first sign of confusion. In a crew room in Dallas, someone printed her name and tacked it to a corkboard under Unsung. In a hangar in Cheyenne, a mechanic told his apprentice she knew exactly where to put her hands on the air. In a STEM lab in Spokane, a teenager taped a photo of an F-16 to her locker and wrote above it in Sharpie, "Watch her work." Even 7C did a thing he'd never done. The next time he saw a black woman in boarding, he did not assume anything about her seat, her job, or her worth. He sat down, buckled up, and said thank you to the person who poured his water. It was small. Small is where systems change start. On a Sunday, Morgan visited her grandparents' graves. She sat on the grass and told them about lights like fallen stars and checklists and dragons' backs, and a little boy named Theo who wanted to grow wings, and a biker who made room for him while the world caught up. She told them about a sentence over a PA that sounded like fear, and another voice that answered like a steady hand. The wind moved through the oaks like a breath. Somewhere, a jet stitched a white seam across blue. She lifted 2 fingers in a salute no one could see and said, "Copy, still here." They asked, "Any fighter pilot on board?" And a black woman woke from a nap and walked toward the door the world still tries to close on her. Skill did what skill always does: cut through noise, land the plane, leave a checklist behind for the next person. The racism didn't vanish. It just lost the mic. If this story moved you, share it with someone who thinks competence has a color. Ask your airline, your workplace, your classroom. Who gets asked to prove it twice? And how can we change the code so the proof is the work itself? And if a kid runs toward the window to watch the planes, don't tell them to stop. Stand with them, point at the lights, and say, "When the sky asks for help, be ready to answer."